challenge is the challenge of what may be called crying wolf. I mean, we've been talking about the Equality Act for years. It keeps emerging and it keeps getting voted down. But it's not like crying wolf. It's much more like standing on the shore and seeing a tsunami come and needing to say, look, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And there's a lot of factors that make what's happening this year in this iteration of the Equality Act that much more significant. The other danger that I sense is that it just seems so overwhelming. What can we do? This seems like a cultural tsunami that we can't push back against. It's over. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think that there is some remarkable work to be done, and there is remarkable work being done in highlighting and elevating the rights of children. And so I asked Emilie Kao, who's an attorney that has defended religious freedom for over a decade. She's the director of the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation, and she's one of the key forces behind something that I want all of our Colson Center folks to know about, which is called A Promise to America's Children. This is a statement and a movement and something that you can actually do. Now, Ryan Anderson gave us 3 things to do: pray, be informed, and and contact, be politically engaged. This is a cultural-wide thing. Look, it's easy to look at what's happening with the Equality Act and see it as an absolute, there's nothing we can do about it. It's not politically guaranteed, particularly if the filibuster holds. But is it as dark and dire as it seems to be?
It is absolutely dark and dire, and I think most people probably don't recognize how dark and dire it is. And I think when you look at the harms of the Equality Act, especially to children, you really can start to grasp that. In fact, you can't really understand how damaging the Equality Act is unless you understand the harms to children. There are 2 main areas in which that would happen, and that's through the politicization of education and the politicization of medicine. So you would have, kindergartners reading I Am Jazz and Jacob's New Dress and becoming confused about their, whether they're a boy or a girl. And then at 9 years old, you would have, recommendations from the transgender community to go on to puberty blockers and then cross-sex hormones and then these irreversible surgeries that have been banned in the UK. And so the Equality Act would impose the transgender ideology on teachers, on doctors, on counselors. And so kids would be indoctrinated into this destructive ideology from a really young age in public school with the curriculum and the policies. And then if they did experience gender dysphoria or just became confused about their gender, they would have nowhere to go, and parents would have nowhere to go except to the quote unquote gender affirming doctors and counselors who would cause irreversible harm to them.
That's right. When I think about the opportunity in front of us, especially as followers of Christ, I think about folks like Amy Carmichael, who went to another country to share the gospel and saw the sexualization and the enslavement of children. I think about William Wilberforce, who woke up and said, look, once he was awakened to his faith, it also awakened him to the suffering that was being caused by the vast slave industry and the suffering that was happening to Africans in particular. Just as recently as last week, we got a question from some of our audience saying, when I talk about these sorts of things to my pastor, it's always like, we need to preach the gospel and not get distracted on some of these political things. The way you just framed it is so utterly critical because throughout the history of the church, Christians have realized that their faith, of course, Jesus says the greatest commandment is to love God and to love your neighbor. But the faith requires us to care for the victims of bad ideas and bad policies and bad cultural realities. The children really are at stake. And in this movement, the Promise to America's Children, I want you to tell us all about it. The Colson Center has signed on as a willing and excited partner. We're letting people know about it. We want our folks to go and sign this statement. We want them to go and join this cause in any way that they can, because the sexual revolution has disproportionately harmed children. The latter chapters of the sexual revolution has disproportionately harmed children. even to the point of their bodily integrity, not to mention their mental health. I mean, this is exactly what Amy Carmichael and others saw when they went, into these other countries. So walk us through, what is the promise to America's children?
Thanks. Yeah, Amy Carmichael and William Wilberforce, they're so inspiring to me, and I know to so many of your listeners. And both of them went out of their way to protect children. I remember Wilberforce also protected children who were doing forced labor. So this is very much in line with the spirit of their mission. So the promise to America's children, it began because we kept on hearing from parents around the country that they were concerned about the sexualization of their children, particularly through school curriculum, the comprehensive sexuality education that you may have heard of and many of your listeners might be familiar with. So there are a lot of efforts at the state and local level to fight back on that kind of education, called CSE for short. But we realized that if the Equality Act were to pass, it would impose comprehensive sexuality educations teaching about gender and sex in schools throughout the country. So based on what we were hearing from parents and the concerns that lawmakers are starting to understand, we developed a list of 10 principles in the promise to just simply state that children are America's most precious resource, and they need to be protected and nurtured, and they need to be protected particularly by their parents. And the state should not interfere with that relationship between a child and that child's parents. But by imposing an ideology upon parents, the medical profession, and education system, that is exactly what the state is doing, is it's getting in the way. So the 10 principles are about the children's minds, first of all, protecting their minds from this kind of exposure to the curriculum that we're talking about, protecting them from pornography, ensuring that if they do have struggles with gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction or any of these issues, they can go to a counselor that their parents want them to go to, because unfortunately we see a lot of censorship of counseling today. And then it goes into ways to protect children's bodies. So everything from, protecting them from the puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to protecting their privacy and safety in single-sex facilities like locker rooms, showers, and bathrooms, to protecting girls' opportunities to participate in sports on a level playing field against their own sex. And then finally, protecting children's relationships with their parents, making sure that parents are the ones who decide, what kind of medical treatment that their children get, particularly for gender dysphoria, making sure that parents are not kept in the dark by schools that have adopted these policies of basically lying to parents about kids and their gender confusion, protecting faith-based adoption and foster care agencies so that children who want a forever family can have one, maximizing the pool of foster and adoptive parents. So finally, and it's incredible that we even need to put this in there, but ensuring that the state does not take any child away from their parents because of disagreements over sex or gender. But, the Ohio case where that actually happened to a family, that's why we had to put that in there. And so we're really grateful for the support of the Colson Center and your endorsement of it. We're delighted that over 50 organizations have endorsed it, both at the state and federal level. We're getting more and more lawmakers signing on to it at both state and federal level. But most of all, we have a ton of parents who are signing on to it. And they are the real energy and the heart and the passion behind the promise to America's children. Parents and grandparents who are making the promise to their own kids. That's what this is all about.
So often this whole issue is framed in language of discrimination, right? That religious freedom or conscience rights this is just a convenient excuse to discriminate against particularly members of the LGBTQ community. What I love about the way that this statement was framed is two things. Number one is it highlights that this isn't like this zero-sum game where it's either like the church or, this ideology. This ideology causes vast, harm, particularly to children. And we're concerned by that, especially all the science and the the medical research that still remains to be done. I mean, we're nowhere, near knowing the medical and scientific ramifications of this ideology, but we're preempting all that and then shoving it not only down America's throats, but also putting it on making children bear the brunt of this. So to turn this into, look, no, this isn't about this competition between religion and faith. What this is, or religion and this new ideology, what it is we care about children, right? We care about children's minds. We care about children's bodies. We care about children's most important relationships with their families. It was a very important, clear way to frame up this whole issue, Emily. And the statement is very well written. And it's something that you can turn around and share with your friends and neighbors. You don't have to be a Christian to believe this stuff. You don't have to be a Christian to, you don't have to be talking to a Christian for them to get it. It's very, very simple. This is what kids deserve. We should prioritize children's rights. We should protect children. It's the 21st century in Western culture in America. This should not be up in the air anymore, that protecting children is one of our top, if not our top priority as a society and as a culture. And this statement, I think, really articulates this well. You've also made it possible then to take this as the foundation for lawmakers, for policy action. And that's important because many of our listeners will know that there's been attempts to compromise with things like the Equality Act to kind of say, well, just, I know you guys want to, force this on almost all areas of culture, but just let us, kind of do our thing in our own churches and in our own homes and in our own houses of worship and so on. I've long said the compromise is not actually a possibility. I think this is a much better legislative, has much better legislative potential than any of the compromise solutions we've seen so far.
Thanks. Yeah, that is a really exciting development, is that I think that the promise is giving a lot of encouragement to lawmakers to bring good legislation to protect children. We already see, a couple dozen bills in the states protecting children from the harms that we just talked about, harms to their bodies, harms in sports and in medicine. We also see a growing number of members of Congress who want to bring legislation to protect children. And now they know they have the support of a nationwide movement of parents and policy groups that are going to say, thank you, and we support you, and we're going to do all that we can to help get the word out about the good legislation that is so needed, and to oppose the bad legislation like the Equality Act that would impose this nationwide ideology and destroy all the work that parents have been trying to do at the state and local level. So that's a very exciting development about the promise, is that it is catalyzing what's really an important movement to protect children.
You've had a lot of legislators already sign on and even put their name publicly on it. That's really impressive.
Yeah, we're really thankful for the courage that these lawmakers have. I mean, it's not easy today in our cancel culture to sign on to something like this that directly calls out the gender ideology for what it is, which is destructive to children. And so we know that they are taking a political risk on behalf of children. And we want to applaud them for that because, we just saw what happened to Ryan's book with it being canceled by Amazon. This is a sad fact about our society today, is that if you are going to stand up and say, a man cannot become a woman, a boy cannot become a girl, and that, children's bodies should be affirmed and protected, we shouldn't be politicizing these issues. We shouldn't be putting ideology about sex and gender into children's lives. You are going to face backlash. You are going to face efforts to cancel you. So we're excited that lawmakers are pushing back and saying, I don't really care if you're going to cancel me. I'm going to stick up for kids.
Yeah. The website for this statement and for this movement is promisetoamericaschildren.org, promisetoamericaschildren.org, or you can come to breakpoint.org and we'll link to it in our show notes for today's podcast. Again, promisetoamericaschildren.org. So when people go to this website, Emily, I know what you want them to do is not just go and read. You want them to get involved. Tell them what they can do.
Well, first of all, they can sign the promise themselves. You know, if they're a parent, grandparent, concerned citizen, they can sign the promise themselves. And then they can share it with their friends, share it with your pastor, share it with, members of your church. I mean, it's important that the church, preach and live out the gospel to children. And that is what this promise is all about. It's about protecting children, whether you're a person of faith or not. But this seems central to the mission of the church. And then you can encourage your lawmakers, to keep on bringing good legislation. You can raise your voice and let them know that you appreciate what they've done and that you're concerned about legislation like the Equality Act.
I just want to emphasize something here, and that is you don't have to be a Christian to believe this stuff. And you don't have to be talking to a Christian for them to be able to make sense of this. This is one of a great example of what Chuck Colson used to call prudential language. We might call it natural law language or common grace language, or however our spiritual traditions kind of lead us. But this is just basically 10 ways that children need to be protected in today's culture, in 3 categories: protecting their minds, protecting their bodies, and protecting their most fundamental relationships. I mean, that's something you can have a conversation with anyone about. You literally can talk about it. Even people that are, on a pro-LGBTQ in particular, or some, ideological kind of bent, can still kind of see the basics of, look, even if we go down this path, we still have to protect children. This is phrased in such a way that you can share it widely, and it can also become kind of these 10 points can become the foundation of an apologetic that you can give for the rights of children in the culture, and you can share this widely on social media and that sort of thing. And you can also share this with your legislators. Listen, we were really proud to sign this, Emilie. I think it's absolutely terrific. We want to get people mobilized around this. This is a very, I don't want to say it's new at any level, because again, it goes all the way back in the history of the church. But I just feel like in the last couple years, what's become the grounding of a children's rights movement, in light of some of these challenges, has really kind of become crystallized. And I think of our friend Katie Faust with her book Them Before Us, and just saying, look, we can't actually as a society make this decision between adult happiness and children's rights. Like, this is just a bad dichotomy, and it's not healthy at all. And I feel like you guys have really put some hard flesh on this, some skin on this, some real action points that we can take on this, Emilie. So really grateful for the work that you've done. I've certainly signed on to it. Who are some of the other folks that have endorsed this?
Well, we're excited that we have a diverse set of groups that represent all areas of concern, whether it's pornography, life, abortion, sexual orientation, gender identity. So we have Americans United for Life. We have the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, the American College of Pediatricians, Family Research Council, Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. We have about 25, I think, family policy councils. And of course, this was put together by not only the Heritage Foundation, but also our partners, Family Policy Alliance and Alliance Defending Freedom. We're also excited about the grassroots parental rights groups that have signed on, like Every Black Life Matters, their parental rights group, the new one called No Left Turn in Education, parental rights groups from New Jersey, from North Carolina. It's really about the grassroots. I mean, the grassroots are the ones who are driving the movement in the local areas, local school districts in the states to protect children. And this is just a way for them to express their concerns to federal lawmakers and to make sure that, Washington, D.C. isn't the one that's imposing ideologies on children and, dividing them from their parents.
The on the ground, just one more question here. The on the ground state level work that's represented in all these state level policy councils is really important. And you and I were having a conversation just, I think, a week or so ago when we were talking about this. And you kind of look at this national piece of legislation like the Equality Act, which is this kind of big, overwhelming sort of legislative push, which it is. But we've also seen just dramatic progress made at the state level to push back on the abortion lobby, and even on kind of this idea that Roe v. Wade has settled the matter is just obviously not true. And a lot of it has to do with the state push. Do you see this state push to be, with the Promise to America's Children, to be kind of a similar thing where it's like, look, there might be this federal piece coming at us. It's legislatively uncertain anyway, but there are some really good steps that are being taken state by state by state?
Definitely. I think that the bills that are being brought in the states show a lot about where the American people are. American people are not endorsing this radical ideology. This is so extreme. Just imagine, 20 years ago, talking to somebody and telling them that boys are now entering into girls' sports, or any boy can go into any, girls' locker room just if they identify as a girl, or telling them that, we're not only allowing, but we're telling doctors that they should be putting children on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, that 13-year-old girls should be getting double mastectomies. The American people are not supporting this, and that's why you see all these bills in the states. And I think especially when it comes to children, these issues should not be decided in Washington, D.C. These issues should be decided at the local level or at the state level. You saw with President Obama's orders, on transgender bathrooms, how they just wreaked havoc throughout the country because, a lot of people are finding these orders to be harmful and divisive. And that's why Washington, D.C. needs to step back, and state lawmakers, local lawmakers, parents need to step up and say, we are going to be the ones who make these decisions for children who can't make these decisions for themselves. Children can't vote. Children can't, testify at hearings. Children can't be witnesses. But we're letting children make life-altering decisions about their bodies with these medical treatments for gender dysphoria that they're way too young to be able to make. As I mentioned, these treatments are banned now in the United Kingdom for kids under 16. So yes, the states are incredibly important, and I think that is where we'll see a lot of the energy in the future.
And suddenly we're giving them the ability to make their own decisions. They're making these decisions having only heard one side of the issue, and not even a well-researched, thoughtful side. The science is settled on this could not be farther from the truth. But it's taught that way. And this Promise to America's Children is a way to get involved. I can't imagine why any Christian would not stand up for the rights of children in this way, would not stand up for the rights of parents in this way. This is a way, as it says on the website, to speak out to your lawmakers as well as to activate the parents and other citizens that are concerned that look, I hear from folks all the time, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Go to promisetoamericaschildren.org. I hear, is there any way to kind of get to lawmakers? And the answer is go to promisetoamericaschildren.org. I hear, why don't you guys work together to do something? We're working together, promisetoamericaschildren.org. Go and sign it and share it more widely. My guest has been Emilie Kao, describing Promise to America's Children. She's the director of the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation, and one of the key architects, along with our friends at FRC and the Family Policy Alliance, behind this Promise to America's Children. Emilie, really, really grateful for your work on this. I love how you've taken what is a wonderful and important essential calling for Christians in particular, and I know your concern is broader than that, but really activated it and given us, kind of a clear step. Here's what you do. First step, second step, third step. This is like the least that I think Americans and Christians can do to protect children. So thanks for your work on this.
Thank you so much.
And if people want to follow you, Emilie, and find you, where can they find you online?
They can go to the Heritage website, heritage.org. I'm also on Twitter at EMILIETHF. And again, we're so grateful for your support, John, and for sharing this with your listeners.
You bet. And we'll link to all that at breakpoint.org. We'll link to Promise to America's Children and some of the resources that we've already talked about on today's program. Thanks for joining us for the Breakpoint Podcast.